So I finally got to see Captain America Civil War after months of anticipation, and today is going to be our Civil War spoiler fest. So if you don't want to know anything about the film, then don't watch this video, because if you do, then you're gonna. So let's start off talking about the characters in Civil War, starting with the main man himself, Captain America. He doesn't die in this movie, and I have to say I'm weirdly disappointed. As much as I like Captain America, there is a real part of me that wanted to see him get taken down at the end of this film. But then after seeing Crossbones get killed in the first 5 minutes, I did kind of get the idea that they weren't going to go down that route. And speaking of Crossbones, let's just talk about him for a second. He is literally in this movie for all of 3 minutes. And I have to say, that's another thing that I'm a little bit disappointed about, considering how few good villains are in the Marvel Cinematic Universe at the moment. I think that they really would have benefited from keeping him around for a little bit longer. I mean, I get that he's not the most interesting villain that Marvel has ever come up with, but he is an integral part of the death of Captain America storyline. So now, if they were to do that story in the future, they would have to alter it, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. Now, of course, this is comic books, so Crossbones could conceivably be brought back to life, but I'm not sure if they're going to do that, because we did literally watch him explode. So that's going to be a difficult thing to come back from. A difficult thing for anyone to come back from, I think we can agree. I'm going to have to roll up my sleeves, A, because we're really getting into this, and B, because it is boiling in this room. And this is a jumper. Now let's move on to the rest of Cap's team and talk about what the future could hold for them, starting with Scarlet Witch. She was actually the character I was most excited to see in this movie. I'm so glad that we finally have another female Avenger. Black Widow has been holding the fort for far too long now, all on her own, and Scarlet Witch has not disappointed in any way, shape or form. Her powers are quite clearly getting stronger and stronger. Seeing her fling Black Widow across the tarmac during the big airport fight was a really cool moment, and shows that she doesn't have the sentimental ties to the team that Hawkeye and Widow clearly do. Another awesome Scarlet Witch moment, possibly one of the most memorable moments of the entire film in my opinion, is when Scarlet Witch throws Vision down into like the Earth's crust. She like really just burrows him down deep into the Earth. It's really quite a brutal scene and does a great job of showing just how powerful the Scarlet Witch can be. Now, another thing I really liked about this movie is that they've started hinting towards the Vision-Scarlet Witch romance. Of course, there's that scene in the kitchen where Vision explains that he just can't help but like Wanda Maximoff, and then in the big airport scene, we find out that he accidentally shoots down Rhodey because he was distracted by his feelings for her. Of course, the Scarlet Witch Vision romance does not really end well for anyone. We have the Avengers Disassembled and House of M storylines, which really are quite miserable for all involved. I'd be fascinated to see if they go down that route once Thanos is out the way. Obviously, right now, all the emphasis is building up to Infinity War, but once Infinity War is over, it's really open season. They could go in any direction, and I think there's definitely potential for House of M in there somewhere. They have to alter it, of course, because they don't have the rights to the mutants, but they could definitely do something along those lines. We need to have a conversation about Ant-Man/Giant Man. I loved it. It was so good. Now, I'd heard rumours that Ant-Man was going to go giant in this movie, but I didn't entirely believe them because it just seemed too good to be true. But we did indeed see it, and it was great. It was great. They did a great job of making him look quite realistic in giant form. As realistic as they possibly could, I think. I don't think it looked goofy at all. I think it was actually quite convincing, and it was just a natural evolution for the character and for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It felt like something that could happen in that world. For me, I would say that Giant Man was the highlight of the airport fight, and I hope that other people liked it as much as I did, because I want to see this character stick around for a long time. Paul Rudd is great in the role, very likeable, very funny, and I think the future is bright. Bring on Ant-Man and Wasp in 2018, I am ready. Another Ant-Man scene I really liked was when he got fired off on one of Hawkeye's arrows. This is obviously an iconic image from the comic books, and I'm so glad that we finally get to see it in live action. Speaking of Hawkeye, I would say this is probably his best portrayal yet, and I think that because in the first Avengers movie, obviously he was sidelined a little bit. In the second Avengers movie, I feel like he was kind of forced down our throats a little bit too much. They tried really hard to boost Hawkeye's popularity in that movie, but I kind of ended up just kind of rejecting him even more because I was like, stop trying to force this character on me. Whereas here, he was just another member of the team. He wasn't overexposed, he wasn't underused. I'd still say he's probably my least favourite Avenger in the movies at least. Of course, in the comics he's recently had this great series by Matt Fraction and David Aja, which is well worth a read if you're interested in the character. But in the movies, I don't know, I mean, he's alright. I just don't think they've really captured the charm of the character, which is so evident in this series. Falcon and Bucky. The rumour was that Captain America was going to die, and one of these two characters was going to take on the mantle, as they both have in the comics at one point or another. Now, that of course didn't happen, but I still think that both have really good roles in this movie. I think that the screenwriters have done a great job of developing Captain America's friendship with both of them. Obviously, Captain America's friendship with Bucky is the one under most strain at the moment, because Bucky is still very much messed up from his brainwashing, which is quite upsetting, but I still think that they do a good job of showing that there is still a friendship between them, that there is still good in Bucky, and that friendship will probably go from strength to strength in future movies. Falcon, though, is very much the bestie at the moment, and I think that is loud and clear throughout this movie. I love how loyal Sam Wilson is to Captain America. Like, he does not question him, there is a lot of respect in that friendship, and I just think it's really nice to see. I can see there being a bit of a rivalry for the title of Captain America's BFF in future movies. Bucky and Falcon competing to be the one. I mean, if I was Bucky and I just got my brain back and I saw my best friend being besties with some other person, I'd be like, hey, I fought with you in fucking World War II, okay? We're best friends, that guy's secondary, get over here. On a more serious note, Bucky killed Howard and Maria Stark. That was a twist that I didn't see coming, and I think Robert Downey Jr. sold the moment so well. Like, when he found out, you could see on his face, it was just pure rage. He was so pissed off, and like, it actually kind of made me a little bit nervous for the Winter Soldier. I was like, oh shit, things are not gonna go well from here. And I think the emotional stakes in that final fight were just great. It just made it a very satisfying watch. So now let's move on to Team Iron Man, starting with Iron Man himself. This movie borrows a scene from the Civil War comic book where Tony Stark is confronted by a grieving mother who lost her son in a superhero-related catastrophe. And that's the thing, both in the comic book and the film, that spurs Tony Stark onto supporting superhero registration. I think that the movie does this scene pretty well, but what I really like is how it's juxtaposed against the speech at Peggy Carter's funeral. I think that was a really clever way of showing the opposing ideologies of these two characters. And I think it's very interesting that when you think about it, both characters were kind of shocked into choosing a side in this conflict. In the main Civil War comic book series, they really paint Iron Man in more of a negative light than the poor, persecuted Captain America. Whereas this movie, I think, takes a much more neutral stance. It doesn't really favour either side, and I think that that works far better. Two of the biggest names in this movie are the two new additions, Spider-Man and Black Panther. Let's start off talking about Spider-Man. I think Tom Holland did a really good job, and I think this movie really sold the idea that this is a character that should be taken seriously. Spider-Man gets some good hits in against the Winter Soldier, aka an assassin that has taken out some of the world's most influential figures. I don't really know how Spider-Man got so competent in combat. I wonder if in Spider-Man Homecoming they're going to reveal that he's been taking martial arts classes or something like that. But I digress, I liked him. I think that this film is a great debut for the character. I'm so glad they didn't overuse him, and equally, I'm so glad that they didn't shoehorn the origin story in. And I hope they don't do the origin story in Spider-Man Homecoming either, because honestly, nobody wants to see that. I really like Black Panther in this movie. It's taken a long time to bring T'Challa to the big screen, but that's obviously been time well spent because he was really good here. The death of his father being his motivation for joining the Civil War makes perfect sense. His action sequences were great, his costume looked great. I think considering we don't really get a proper origin story here, I think the film still does a really good job of telling us what the character's about. And to be honest, I'd be quite happy as not getting an origin story. I think we're all pretty much agreed that origin stories are played out, and I think we get enough information here to just kind of hit the ground running, forget about the origin, let's just get some great Black Panther stories right off the bat. Rhodey gets paralysed in this movie, but it doesn't really hit you emotionally because Tony Stark immediately gives him some cybernetic legs, and you know he's going to be walking again just fine in a couple of months. So, I don't know. I mean, I just feel like this character doesn't have much more ground to cover now. I don't believe War Machine has any iconic comic book stories, and I know that they don't really give him anything fun to do in these movies. So, I don't know. I feel like they really desperately need to give him something pivotal to do, because honestly, right now, he does feel a little bit expendable. I love Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, and I think this is another great installment for her. I do feel like she kind of just disappears after she screws over Black Panther and lets Steve and Bucky escape. She just kind of disappears, you know, like, is she, did she get arrested? Is she still one of Iron Man's Avengers? I mean, is she just kind of laying low? Who knows? Who knows? It's not really explained, but, you know, this is another good installment for her. She's always good. She's always good. Baron Zemo, I don't want to talk about him for too long because there's not really much to talk about. We can just throw him on the pile of Marvel villains that nobody cares about, alongside Malekith. Malekith. What a fucking joke. I don't know. I'm kind of disappointed. Daniel Bruhl's a good actor. The Russo brothers are good directors. I thought they'd be able to pull this one together. I thought that this could be the first great big screen Marvel villain that we've had since Loki, let's face it. But no, it's not. And you know, at the end of the movie, it kind of seems like he's never gonna come back. Like, I don't know if that's intentional, but he kind of says, like, you know, I split up the Avengers, that was my goal, see you later. You know, like, it feels like he's done. And it's like, what did he really contribute to the Marvel Universe, you know? Baron Zemo is a big Captain America villain in the comics, and here he just feels throwaway, which is a shame. So the movie ends on a pretty optimistic note, all things considered. Tony Stark reads Captain America's letter, and it basically says, look, I know that sucked, but I'm still here to help if you need me, and I think that's a nice way to end things. It doesn't completely resolve things between the two of them, but it shows that they're both committed to working on the relationship, and that they're mature enough to put their individual differences aside for the good of the planet. And of course, we know that they're going to have to do that when Thanos arrives and starts fucking things up big time. Infinity War Part 1 is actually probably the next time we're going to see most of these characters, with the exception of Tony Stark, who is confirmed to be appearing in Spider-Man Homecoming. That's quite a long wait to see these characters again. I'm kind of sad about that, but it should be interesting when they finally do pop back up. So, there were a couple of things that weren't in the movie that I would have liked to have seen. General Ross turning into Red Hulk would have been great. I would have liked to have seen the formation of the Thunderbolts, maybe get a little bit of Taskmaster action in there. I'm a big Taskmaster fan, if you're not aware. But, you know, it was already a long movie, and I think if they shoehorned those things in as well, it would have just possibly ruined it. So I'm okay that we didn't see those things. I'll forgive you guys. But in the future, definitely, I'd like to see those things unfold. But what about you? Was there anything in the movie that you weren't a big fan of? What did you like? Was there anything you would have liked to have seen that wasn't in the movie? Do let me know in the comment section below. You can like and subscribe if you're that way inclined. If not, don't worry about it. There are bigger problems in the world. And yeah, that's pretty much everything.